obviously because of this extreme national security failure and danger that the Trump national security team puts the country in by their refusal to tell the truth and their failure once again to demonstrate to act with competence. So
To
um,
follow any rules. I mean, it's just that there's just no rule following. There's no
right.
standards of behavior. I mean, it's just shocking.
Yeah, yeah, and so look, I mean, as we made a decision, actually months ago at the time when we were starting. We've been doing media misses to try to
Right.
look at criticism, to look at sort of failures on the part of the media, and then we made a switch to on target because we wanted to focus on examples of good work that's happening with the idea that in this time, we are dependent increasingly on those sort of talented journalists and lawyers and judges and so forth who are ready to stand up to this administration, this regime, and tell the truth. And I think the quality of what Jeffrey Goldberg at the Atlantic did in terms of telling the story and taking a time to be able to articulate what happened with his being brought into this what should have been a very private chat of the principals of the security team, and instead he's invited in and he makes a real point of taking time in his story, in his original story, to describe the fact that he really had reasons to doubt. Was this true? Was it some kind of a disinfo operation? Was it some media gadfly?
Right.
Was it foreign intelligence? Were these people who they thought they were saying that they were? And then finally, when the quality of the conversation got closer to the event itself, he saw that there was a level of, in his words, sort of verisimilitude that convinced him this was a real thing.
And then the attack happened,
Yeah,
so wow, everything they talked about, it was actually happening in real life. I just, as a journalist, I admired the way that the story was put together, because instead of like doing this kind of straight news kind of headline, Associated Press kind of lead, and like that, he brought people into it.
yeah,
He let them understand that what it was like to be a journalist who suddenly an incredibly improbable thing happens where the national security advisor is inviting you into a signal chat,
yeah,
and what does that mean, and it's totally understandable that he would worry that he was being entrapped in some way, because there are a lot of bad actors
yeah.
who that's exactly what they do, is try to trick journalists into they'll like record them at bars and stuff like that and try to embarrass them and make them look bad. And so he thought maybe this might be that, and it's just kind of fascinating how he stayed with it and gained more and more kind of realization that this was a real thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he also, I mean, I think I don't have the exact number. I think it's about a week, maybe almost 10 days from the event,
Yeah,
from that
about a week and a half. Yeah.
yeah, the bombing, where he made a decision to take his time and sort of do this properly, which really undercuts the criticism that came very quickly from the regime about about who this was and what he was doing. And look, I think we want to talk about the seriousness of it, but I'm let's just stay with the journalism for a minute and understand. We're dealing with the fact, and it's this is not new. This has been going on since Trump started, which was always attack the media. It's all fake news. Everything's a
Mhm.
hoax. Don't
Right.
believe anything that you see. Don't believe what you hear. Don't trust what these people are telling you. Just pay attention to me. I'm the one who's going to tell you what the truth is. And this is the same playbook that we're seeing play out now, but with really life and death consequences. And I made a point of gathering the list. With Trump, already back in 2020 with the losers and suckers article, the losers and suckers
Right.
comments Trump
Written by Goldberg, right?
Fallen Soldiers was written by Jeffrey Goldberg. And at that time, you had Trump, calling him a sleazebag and calling
Right.
him a con man, and saying that he's a slime ball reporter. So, there was already this sort of readiness to you know completely trash him. And of course, that's what happened again now. You had, Trump saying, he makes up a lot of stories, and he's, his words, he's basically bad for the country, right? And
Right.
okay, Trump does this. We know this. We're suffering for it. We're living through it. But what also happened? You have, Hegseth, calling him, and I'll give you the things that he said. He called him deceitful and a highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of hoaxes, peddling hoaxes, and in this case, he said he peddles in garbage.
Hmm.
Right now, this is the same guy who's in the same conversation is saying that no one was texting war plans, and they look and it wasn't just Hegseth. You had this whole bunch of people. The Caroline Levitt,
Right.
the his own press secretary, saying, well, he's known for quote unquote sensationalist
Right.
spin.
They called him a
Um,
total sleaze bag. Did you?
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean,
I mean,
it's
and
just, and it's
I want
just
to
you
give
don't
you
pay
one.
attention to the facts. It's a because this guy is saying them.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just kill the messenger because we don't like the message, even though the National Security Council confirmed that it was a legitimate signal chat. I mean,
yeah.
they got confirmation from the White House, and then members of the White House staff start saying it's a hoax. So they're just trying to fuzzy up things and just confuse people. They're just trying to assault the truth so that nobody can believe anything or know what to believe.
Right, and they're doing it sort of two levels. So one is to attack Jeffrey Goldberg, and then the other one now is to say, oh, well, they weren't really classified war
Right,
plans,
right,
right? So to suggest that that the attack, the summary that came from Jeffrey Goldberg is not reliable. And look, none of that passes the smell test. There today, and it was in the hearings today. They're saying, well, in the summary of that chat, there was no mention of sources and methods, right? And now there were broadly speaking locations, there were
right,
weapons package systems, all those things were there,
right,
and which was shared with a reporter. And by the way, who else may have seen that? And
right.
and that's again part of the unknown here, that this has sort of slipped so far out of the boundaries of reliable, responsible behavior when there are systems in place for secure communication that these people are flouting because they think somehow that this all doesn't apply to them.
Well, the whole war plans thing drives me nuts. They're saying, well, it wasn't war plans, and they're arguing that Texas is arguing, well, they just didn't involve that it was just about an attack, not about a whole war. I mean,
Right,
it's the stupidest kind of explanation, or that there's nobody declared a war, so it's not really a war. I mean, it's just hard to know why they're saying that war plans is not accurate, but it's idiotic. Some guy on Blue Sky said, well, they're just saying it's not from the war plans region of France. This idea that they're just using these semantic arguments. I mean, everyone
right,
who reads the thing, Stephen, you read the thing, which was the whole thing was released today because they're saying all these baloney statements. Goldberg and the Atlantic released the whole thing today,
right,
and it's clear they're talking about an attack on an enemy. They're talking
right,
about F-18s. They're talking
right.
about
And hours before
drones.
the attack itself.
Yes, yes, and this conversation on this chat was a guy who was in Russia, one of the U.S. Envoys who's in Russia. Do you think that the Russians were able to get a hold of that? I mean, this is, and then you get this argument that, well, the thing turned out fine. There was no, it didn't harm the
Right, we were
operation at
successful.
all. I mean, do we know? Number one, do we know that? Do we know
Yeah.
that some guy didn't escape from being because he was tipped off? And do we know that next time that they use this, this not secure device, that it won't make bad people get away with things, or endanger military personnel who are flying these planes.
Right. I mean, one of the Congress people today was questioning Gabbard and Ratcliffe. Sort of made the point, if this has been used one time, you can be sure that it's been used more than
Right,
once.
right.
So the issue of the precedent and therefore the need to spotlight is so critical. And I think it's maybe one time that we're seeing Democrats and golly Republicans
Yeah,
too saying that this needs to be investigated. And I want to linger for a minute longer on Goldberg's reporting because he did come back and do a second story today. And I'm going to read two sentences just because I think he sets up sort of what's at issue, and it really underscores, what it means to have a solid, reliable, credible journalist doing the serious work of journalism. The two sentences are this: the statements by Hegseth, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, and Trump, combined with the assertions made by numerous administration officials that we are lying about the content of the signal text, have led us to believe that people should see the text in order to reach their own conclusions. There was a clear public interest in disclosing the sort of information that Trump advisors included in non secure communications channels, especially because senior administration figures are attempting to downplay the significance of the messages that were shared.
right, right. Another point that I'm not sure everyone's got here is, why were they using Signal?
Hmm.
Well, if they weren't using Signal just because they're sloppy. I mean, obviously they could have gone to more secure means, and they should have, because they're endangered our troops. But they're going to Signal that that Signal chat was set with an auto delete. To
Yeah,
where it would automatically delete after, I believe it was after a week. And what they're doing is they're violating the records laws, the public records laws, because those kind of conversations are supposed to be part of the public record,
right,
because we're supposed to be living in a free country, in a democracy where we know what our government does, and that where records are kept. And so they were on Signal so that they could have these conversations and have no accountability, because the conversations would be deleted. So what they did, in order to protect themselves from accountability, they endangered our troops.
right.
And it's just, so it's not just that they're incompetent; they are incompetent, but it's that they're also devious. It's that
Yeah.
it's that they're trying to cover up for their own mistakes.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I have to say, I mean, I may be repetitive in my need to talk about, liars lying and how much I personally detest it and how much I detest it, as a citizen of a democratic country where we depend upon our leadership being able to speak honestly, to represent the public. And when you have these people who will say anything on a given day, if they think it serves their own interests, they are obviously not serving the interests of democracy. And there's this ridiculous game that they play, that they're being so transparent while simultaneously they are again and again and again sort of lying to cover up their own misdeeds.
So what do you think about this one? I mean, this is them. This doesn't pass the smell test at all. I can't imagine any Trump supporter or Republican who's got a mind that still operates, believing that this was not a big mistake and a big problem, that just violated all these rules on how you conduct a military.
Yeah.
And so
Surely
I,
the,
I
the military members of the Trump crowd would agree with you.
Right. So I just wonder whether this doesn't even pass the smell test with them. And I just wonder whether at some point in time, Marco Rubio said today that it was a quote big mistake. So it is, so that's something. But I
Yeah,
just, right now they're getting at I mean, for more than a day now, they've been talking about how it was no big deal, didn't hurt anyone.
right.
And even suggesting, Walton even was suggesting that somehow Goldberg snuck into the chat, which is completely absurd. And
Look,
and
I
but
mean,
so I
please.
just wonder. My question, Stephen, for you is will they back off from this? Will they finally realize that they look really bad here with normal people, and that they just need to admit that they screwed up and promise to do better? I mean, that to me, that would be what you should do. I don't
Right.
know what they will do.
Well, look, we know that they've all learned from Trump to, never take responsibility, never to be accountable for mistakes that you've made, never to apologize. This is the this is the climate, this is the approach that they've taken, and they seem to just be on auto repeat over and over and over, double down, triple down, all
Mm,
of that. The only thing that gives me promise in this case is that you had like Roger Wicker along with Jack Reed agreeing that there needs to be an investigation of
right.
this. So you
And it's
have,
a
I
Republican
think,
and a Democrat.
yeah, and I think on the Intelligence Committee, and I think you're going to start to see a certain amount of rising recognition that then on a bipartisan basis that we need actually answers about this, because it's not about Trump and his bunch and supporting them at this point. It's about the national security and the
Right,
safety
right,
of men and women who are in harm's way. And look, I mean, there's a whole list of this. I mean, the impact is in terms of national security. The impact is in terms of our kind of global alliances. The
right.
impact is in terms of trust and respect and the sharing of intelligence. And this blunder, this arrogant incompetence, I think has the consequence of endangering us on all of those levels. And look, right now, I mean, David French had a column in the New York Times today, which was very detailed. He's got, significant national security background. And, he was among those saying, Hegseth needs to resign, and he needs to resign, and he would resign if he was in any sense a man of honor, because he would understand that he has broken the most basic protocol that provides leadership, a model to the men and women who are in combat.
Right. I mean, can you imagine what this does to the morale in the military and to their confidence in their leadership? I mean, it's clear to me that these Republican cabinet members were really, in order to conduct a secret conversation that would be later deleted, they were willing to sacrifice security to protect our troops. And,
Yeah,
so clearly, so if you're a member of the military, you've got to come to the conclusion that these people would care much more about their own political standing
loyalty
than
to
they
Trump.
do about, yeah, than about your life, your ability to survive, in war setting. And so it's got to be bad for morale. I mean, yeah, they never should have. I mean, look at Hegseth. Look at all the stuff against him before he got confirmed. I mean, it's a scandal that he ever got confirmed. And so I don't know. I think Trump picked him because he was an unthinking loyalist who
Yeah,
would do whatever Trump said.
who looks the part.
Yeah, right, right. And just but just this kind of macho guy who obviously they've gone after and gotten rid of, black people in the military and women at high levels of the leadership. So there is this kind of element of kind of, to me, this white male kind of dominance that is embarrassing itself, and also bad for the strength of the military, because when you get
Yeah,
rid of people based on whether they're male or female or black or white, which is what they did,
yeah.
then you're weakening the military.
Yeah, well, so look, one of the people on this call has sort of asked, "What can we do?"
Yeah,
Four question marks, or five, or three, or something. At least three. And this is one of those cases where we talk about reach out to your representatives.
right.
Well, this is one of those cases where I think it's a very concrete example where reaching out and letting them know that you're angry about it, letting them know that investigations need to happen, and I think the voices need to be really loud about it, because this is one of those that I mean, it's meaningful on its own terms, but it's illustrative of the whole kind of range of failures of this administration. And I'm curious, Mark, to you. Let's think about it in terms of this absolutely crazy flooding of the news cycle with you know desecration after desecration. Will this one stick?
I think this has the potential to stick because it's so understandable. and
Yeah.
it's and there are so many scandals that are, I don't think people really understood USAID, and theoretically they can't imagine what it means to like a poor African kid, which so the victims of these horrible policies aren't so concrete. I mean, but everyone wants us to have a competent military, and
Yeah.
for those people to be treated right too, the people who are doing that for us. And so I do think this will stick in some ways. I mean, who knows whether anything sticks with this bunch? I mean, unfortunately, they get away with stuff, and the news media has such a short attention span. Now, the New York Times has put the story on page one, 2 days in a row, which is some accomplishment, and they led with it at least today after really
Well,
underplaying it
um,
the first day. So
yeah,
but I'm tracking that because
yeah,
because when the Hillary email thing came out, one of the times it came out just before the 2016 election, the New York Times had 10 page one stories in a 6 day period, and
mm,
so this is by a scale of about a
yeah.
thousand
Where we have
bigger
barely
than that. This is
beat.
way bigger than that.
Right, right. And that's the thing. This is a big deal, and you hope that there might be a few people at the time saying that who remember their, in our view, I think the failure of overplaying Hillary Clinton's emails and the danger of the insecure server. Well,
Mhm.
this in comparison is a lot more serious, and
Yeah.
this is a chance for the New York Times, and others to pick it up and to keep banging the drum, and that's the same point, for everybody here. I mean, I think Rick already said, one of the people on the call said that he's already reached out to his Ohio representatives, and I think
Good.
this is one of those moments where we all really need to do that, to let them know this isn't a story that should just blow over, despite the regime's efforts to make it blow over.
Yeah, the theme of my Stop the Presses newsletter this week was people power, and the fact that this we're all feeling besieged by the law breaking that's going on in the Trump regime, and people need to understand that they can make a difference, that pressure does work with politicians in Washington, in Congress at least, just because they need to get reelected, and so calling them and sending them emails and things like that really does work, and so does attending protests. There's a big one April 5th
Right.
that people need to, like, I think, at least my opinion is, people need to make plans for that, and they
Yeah.
need to invite their family and friends. They need to, because we need to make a statement here that we're not good with all of this, and we're not going to go down just forgetting about all this horrible behavior, the people being snatched off the street who are here legally in this country and being shipped off someplace. We're not, this is the key moment for our democracy if it's going to survive, and we need to tell people that we're not going to put up with it, that this is not what America is supposed to be, and when an incompetent, lying, cruel government is not what we want, and people need to say that.
Yeah, and look, it's been disappointing to see how many Democratic elected officials have failed to grasp the urgency of this moment. But I think we're in this moment now where we have to, use our power, our collective power, to
Right.
motivate each other to go out to the streets. Look, I mean, I've said it before. It's worth saying again. I think we're headed toward, the necessity of what a Harvard researcher had said, which is, you need 3.5% of a population to be able to really create the conditions where demonstrations at that level, which in the American context is 12 million people in the streets and demonstrating, where it has the ability to begin to, both define what your goals are, explain what redress you want, and stay in the streets and demand it. And we may not be exactly in that moment yet. I think we're moving toward it. I think April
Right.
5th is part of that. I think the demonstrations, the protests at Tesla showrooms are part of it. And I think we're building. I mean, if it turns out that people start losing their Social Security benefits or they
Right.
get turned off on any given week, I think that's going to bring an awful lot of people ultimately out in the streets. That might be the thing if I'm looking for the catalyst, the catalytic moment that finally convinces people that they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore.
Right.
That might be it. But I think we're in a period and we don't have that much time.
No, we don't have time, but now's the time to get out there. Get out there and do something. I mean,
Yeah,
there are a lot of different ways that things you can do. You support good media, cancel bad media. I mean, there are many ways that we can make a difference. But now's the time, man. I mean,
yeah,
don't wonder why you didn't do anything 10 years from now when this country's a dictatorship,
yeah,
and that really is a possibility. It's really what the president of the United States wants to happen. He
yeah,
wants to be a king. He wants to be a dictator. This is not hyperbole on my part. This is what he's said. This is what he's doing. This is the reality we face right now, and but it's not inevitable. They want you to think it's inevitable, Stephen, and they didn't even get half of the vote in the
yeah,
election.
yeah.
And
And
so
let's remember that those executive orders, they're not laws. That
right,
somebody
right,
sort of put it. These are enhanced memos.
right,
Right?
right. It's
They
what he
have
wants to
legal
happen.
power. They don't
Yeah,
have legal power except for when you have cowards who roll over and decide to allow it to happen. So we can't be you know what is the word for it? We can't be cowed by it. We
right.
can't allow ourselves to be frightened by what they're trying to do. And look, I think that's why the point about collective power is so fundamental here.
Yeah. So let's do it.
Yeah, so everybody who joined us today, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mark and I do on target, not always every week, but at least every other week. And hopefully you'll connect and do check out Mark's excellent Stop the Presses newsletter. And if you haven't checked out Mine America,
Yeah. Check America, America. It's really good.
thank you so
Yeah.
much, and thanks everyone for
Right.
joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Bye.